We are in Isaiah 24. And last week, I just kind of catch us up a little bit. Isaiah 24 through 27 is kind of a section about the tale of two cities. The city of the world, the city of men, versus the city of God. And in Isaiah 24, this is actually where you get a lot of your imagery from Paul, from Jesus, and also in the book of Revelation, of these grand eschatological, which just means end-time scenes. You're going to get banquet scenes. You're going to get death being swallowed up, okay? You're going to be getting the book of life being opened. All right, you're going to be getting all of these ideas of the fruit and the vine, right? The dry vine versus the abundant vine. And all of these become kingdom language. It all becomes kingdom language. And so when you're in the New Testament, when you're looking at chapters 24 through 29 of Isaiah, a lot of people like to spend time in the messianic ones, in, Isaiah 49 all the way to 59, speaking of Jesus specifically as the suffering servant and the servant of God. But if you're looking at a lot of kingdom imagery, how the New Testament uses it in the book of Revelation, you're going to find a lot of similarities in chapter 24, 25, 26, 27, as you will in the New Testament. And that's one of the cool things about the New Testament. The New Testament doesn't just create its own terms. When it says things like death will be swallowed up in victory, in 1 Corinthians 15. It's referencing a passage here in Isaiah 25 that if you go and read all of Isaiah 25, you realize there's more to that statement than just the statement itself, okay? And the cool thing is, can anyone tell me off the top of their head in 1 Corinthians 15, what are some of the major points that Paul's making before it leads up to death being swallowed up in victory? Anyone off the top of their head? 1 Corinthians 15. He starts off with saying, what was most important to Paul? What he taught? Right? Christ and him crucified. The most important thing, he goes into the witnesses, right, of all the people who have been witnessed. But after that, he starts talking about this, when Jesus turns the kingdom back over to God, something's going to happen. And then he goes into this. People are not understanding, well, how is God going to recreate? How is there going to be a heavenly creation? Or, as we would consider it a spiritual creation. And he starts saying, if God can create all these things in the physical, right, in the way that it is now, can he not create something more, right? This new creation, okay? Even our bodies, right? Even our bodies are going to be made new. A lot of this image, it's drawing off these passages that we're going to be reading in Isaiah 24, 25, 26, and 27. So, which just brings continuity to the whole message, doesn't it? That Paul's not just slinging words out there and slinging phrases out there and creating his own language and creating his own ideas. He's taking very Jewish concepts, very Jewish understanding of the Messiah and the kingdom. So when we're reading phrases, we need to understand that there's a background to these phrases, okay, which will help us in our understanding. But in Isaiah 24 so far, we looked at not just the destruction of the world, but the uncreation of the world. And what do we talk about the difference between destruction of the world and uncreation? Just quickly. Yeah, so an uncreation is not just destroying and rebuilding, but it's going back. Right? You're going back to something new in a sense. Here, I'll put one here for you. You said yours? I'm just going to put it here. So there's a whole uncreation, right? We're going to leave the world desolate and empty. There's a complete desolation of the wicked city, and this is kind of one of the concepts. The wicked city is represented by the entire earth. So it starts off in the first 9 verses, the earth will be desolate, the earth will be laid low, the earth will be uncreated, the earth will be destroyed, the earth will be disciplined because of breaking of the covenant. And then when we get into verse 10, the wasted, or as you may say, the chaotic, or the wicked city is broken down, every house is shut up so that none can enter. Verse 11, there is an outcry in the streets for a lack of wine. All joy has grown dark, and gladness of earth is banished. And so this is the next concept. In Isaiah 24, all the joy is gone. And if you remember last week, it's not that they've stopped dancing. It's not that they stopped singing. It's not that they stopped doing things. It's that what? Those things no longer bring joy because of a day that is coming. And when this day comes, everything that used to bring joy has no meaning or value anymore, right? And it's kind of like a teen, and I brought this illustration up last week, but it's kind of like a teen doing some tomfoolery stuff, right? Shenanigans. And then the shenanigans, they get caught. And someone goes, why would you do that? And for the first time during that event, you start thinking, why am I doing that? Right? If you're a smart teen, right? Some teens are like, well, because I want to do, right? But they have to reflect, or maybe it's a year or two goes by, right? And they look back and they realize that thing that I was caught up in the moment thinking it was fun and thinking it brought me joy didn't. So there's a day coming, joy will be gone in the same things that would normally bring joy. There's an interlude of praise, and we'll look at that here in a moment. There's an interlude of Isaiah as well. But then the chapter is going to end with God bringing judgment on all of heaven and all of earth for His glory. For His glory. Okay? So let's start. Let's start back in verse 11. I'm going to read just a couple verses, and we're going to talk about some things, okay? So let's look at verse 11. There is an outcry in the streets for a lack of wine. All joy is grown dark. The gladness of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city. The gates are battered into ruins. For thus it shall be in the midst of the earth among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as the gleaning when the grape harvest is done. They lift up their voices. They sing for joy over the majesty of the Lord. They shout from the west. Wait a minute. There's a turn here, isn't there? We just saw that all the joy is what? Gone. Well, what does verse 14 tell us? They sing for joy. What's going on? And now at first, they hear this joy from where? Where do they hear it from? The west. What does the west represent in Scripture? Close, but no. Not close, sorry. Well, that's what they're going to be singing about. That's what they're going to be singing about, the majesty of the Lord. But from the west. Does anyone know where Jonah went? As far west as he possibly could. And in Scripture, north, south, or going up and going down matter. When you hear those, when you see those, it's not just telling you that they went down somewhere and up somewhere and use that west, east. They're not just giving you directions like we would do. There's usually a theological concept that comes from, we're hearing this from the west. Why is it not from the east? Why is it not from the north? Why is it not from the south? The west is where as far away from God as you possibly could get in Scripture. Timbuktu, we'd call it. Where God can't be found. And where does the joy begin? In the west, where God cannot be found. Right? So in the midst of all of this lack of joy, all of a sudden there's a song being sung. So whatever event we're talking about, it's going to bring darkness and gloom, but it's also going to be the way and the reason people can hear singing of God's people, or the singing of God's song, from as far off as you can possibly think. As far away from God as you could possibly think. Anybody have any implications of what that could represent? Okay, so there's the idea of the remnant, and we're going to see that as well. Gentiles. There is a group of people that when this day happens are going to be searching for a God that nobody thought would be searching for. Right? And even in Jesus' own ministry, if we were going to bring this kind of practical into Jesus' ministry, every now and then you get a group of whom? Of Gentile believers. That shouldn't be, right, in the case in which the way the Jews operated and how the Jews behaved themselves, but you're always going to find believers among the nations, even of the remotest parts of the earth. As far away from God's country as you can get, you're going to find believers. And sometimes even more. Right? So keep that in mind as we go. They shout from the west, therefore in the east, give glory to the Lord. So there's something happening in the west that the prophet is saying, therefore in the east, which is Israel and all, right? Even their enemies, because you hear shouting for joy, why don't you also join in the song? So it's almost like they're going to be taught from Gentiles. They're going to be taught from the nations. They're going to be taught from someone other than God's own chosen people. And it ought to cause the people who know better to do what? To sing, to join. Okay, so watch. Therefore in the east give glory to the Lord. In the coastlands of the sea give glory to the name of the Lord, for the God of Israel. From the ends of the earth we hear songs of praise, of glory to the righteous one. So here's an interesting thing. We're in the midst of the darkest day, right? Gloom, joy gone. That's the world's perspective. When this day comes, it looks as if everything's over. And in the midst of when it feels like everything's over, and everything's done, and everything's destroyed, who's the name that is heard? Does that have any application in people's lives? During people's darkest days, people's worst days, days when it feels dark and gloom, what all of a sudden are people receptive to? God, aren't they? Yes. They're receptive to God. They're receptive to the message. They can hear for the first time because everything's quiet. They've shut everything out. Right? When you experience loss or you experience pain, all of a sudden the things that mattered, right? Going to the movies, going and doing that, those things just seem, what's the point? And all of a sudden, somewhere in that sitting, in that darkness, all of a sudden you can hear something that you've never heard before. Right? And it's interesting, we use this concept all the time, and me and Joe talk about it. Joe brings it up. This idea of those who are not grown up in a Christian home versus those who are born in the church. There's something about those who are not born in the church, not raised up, and they find the Lord later that kind of ignites the faith of those this is what I've always done. I couldn't see myself being anywhere else, right? They were born and kind of raised in the church. And so we kind of complement each other in many ways, right? And so this is Israel and the nations kind of coming together for the praise and the glory of the righteous one. But watch, in the midst of that praise, someone read the very ending of verse 16. Read it. Need a mic? Here. Alex, here you go. Just read all of 16. And read down to 18. Read 16 to 18 of Isaiah 24.
From the ends of the earth we hear songs of praise of glory to the righteous one. But I say, I waste away, woe is me, for the traitors have betrayed, with betrayal the traitors have betrayed. Terror and the pit and the snare are upon you, O inhabitant of the earth. He who flee at the sound of the terror shall fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit shall be caught in the snare. For the windows of the heaven are opened, and the foundations of the earth tremble.
Okay. In the midst of destruction, there's a song of hope. Those who are from the west are singing it. The challenge is those from the east and the coastlands and of the mother country, we'll say, to sing along with them. And then what does Isaiah, what's the very next thing Isaiah witnesses? Woe is me, betrayal from the traitors. When they should hear the song of God, when they should hear the praise of God, when they should respond, what do they end up doing instead? Betraying God. Does that fit anywhere in the gospel? Does that fit anywhere in the storyline of Jesus? When Jesus comes, right? The light of heaven is here. The pathway to God. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He came to his own, but his own did not receive him. They betrayed him. They were traitors. Right? And so you're seeing a picture of the gospel. Now, we're fast forwarding to Jesus, but this has been Israel's every point of their life, every point in their history. He'll send a judge, right? They'll wake up for a little bit, but what do they do to that judge? Most of the time, the judge ends up getting betrayed. The judge himself ends up getting killed. The prophet gets killed, right? Now, this is interesting because Isaiah is the prophet. He's feeling betrayed. But what did God tell him back in Isaiah chapter 6 when he says, "Here am I, send me"? What did God warn him of? They're going to kill you. They're going to betray you. The one who is sent at the right time to save them, to give them the words of life, they're going to betray you and kill you. And so Isaiah is seeing this happen. Now, interestingly enough, the stuff that Isaiah is speaking about, he never sees during his lifetime. He never sees during his lifetime. Because right then and right now, Israel's doing good. And what I mean by doing good is they're still a nation, they still have land, they're still wealthy, they can still defeat their enemies. And Isaiah is saying, hey, there's coming a day, and they're going, be quiet. Stop talking. And eventually, let's kill him. We don't want to hear it anymore. And Isaiah's feeling the burden, and this is later on in his ministry. So he's getting later on in his ministry to the point where they're starting to become hostile to his words. Because it's starting to get near and dear. Do people ever want to hear, hey, I'd stop that, or else? Because the punishment is not right here and right now. What do people assume? I have time to change. Oftentimes, what else do they think?
There won't actually be
punishment. Huh?
There won't actually be punishment.
There actually won't be punishment. I mean, you ever go through those stages when you're young, feeling like it's never gonna happen to me. You just feel like you're never gonna die, like you just feel invincible, and then all of a sudden one day happens and you realize your back hurts, and you're like, I wish, right, the Lord would come. But people don't want to hear. And unfortunately, for most people, when do they actually start listening? Sometimes when it's too late. Or sometimes when death's at their door. Or punishment's already passed. You could warn them for hundreds of years. Noah, will they listen? Rain? Flood? A boat? What? Right? Isn't this not a theme that just rinse and repeat through Scripture? All right? So, he's feeling betrayed. He says, therefore the windows of heaven are open and the foundations of the earth tremble. Does that remind you of a story? Noah, right? Verse 19, the earth is utterly broken, the earth is split apart, and the earth is violently shaken. Now, what does that term shaken mean in Scripture? When God shakes something. There's disruption. Stirring things up. I don't know if you guys ever remember, I know you remember him. I don't know if you remember saying that Jim used to say all the time. He's like, good preaching, he used to tell me, is like being the agitator in a washing machine. You know what the point of the agitator is, right? Stirs things up. It gets the clothes. Do people like to be agitated? Do people like the agitator? No. But they love the clean field, don't they? And some people want the clean field without the agitator. God is the agitator. And sometimes we always see God as the other, right? The loving, great, when he is. And the reason he puts you through an agitator is what? For what reason? What is his purpose? Yep. And so like when the earth is shaken, what's the only kingdom that won't be? The kingdom is unshakable, unmovable, cannot be destroyed. So where do you want to be when things get shaken up? And later in chapter 25, it's going to be the mountain of God is the place that cannot be shaken. My dad, he works in concrete and asphalt. So whenever he sees this, he puts rocks through agitators and then filters, and it shakes. And what happens to the smaller rocks? They go down and they get filtered and filtered and filtered until you get to the type of stone that you want. But you're not going to try to hand pick it. It's not going to work. Sometimes you got to agitate. Well, the thing that we're about to see in Isaiah 25 is the righteous are going to have to also go through what? The agitator. Sometimes it's because of other people's sins, but they're going to have to go through it, and the ones who are saved are those who wait on the Lord. Things are bad, things don't look good, but they can hear what? They can hear the song of God, they can hear the glory of God, and they join in, right? So I'm kind of projecting a little bit as we get to chapter 24, but watch. So, the earth is utterly broken, the earth is split apart, the earth is violently shaken, the earth staggers like a drunk man, it sways like a hut, its transgressions lies heavy upon it, and it falls and will not rise again. And this is a phrase you're going to see over and over and over again. It will not rise again, it will not build itself up again, it will never be built again. Isaiah, when we use the word eschatological, we're talking about end times. He is using end-time pictures, as if whenever God does this, this chaotic city will never be built again. It will never come to fruition. Okay? So we're looking even beyond, most likely, Jesus bringing the kingdom. We might be looking for when Jesus comes and builds the final kingdom. And that's what we kind of get into the book of Revelation a little bit. But we've talked about this, dual line fulfillment, right? There are small fulfillments that happen. We're speaking of Israel coming out of Babylon, then we're speaking of being rescued from Rome, then we're speaking of Jesus, then you're speaking of AD 70. A lot of these major events that happen in history, this could fit almost any one of those major events, couldn't it? Right? And so these are cycles and patterns that the earth goes through. But watch, on that day, this is a specific day, the Lord will punish the host of heaven, in heaven, and the kings of earth on the earth. Who's the host of heaven in heaven? Who's the host of heaven? Yeah, that's right. Someone read 1 Kings 22:19. 1 Kings 22:19. And who's reading from the ESV tonight? Joe, will you read Psalm 82? So someone first read 1 Kings 22:19. And then Joe, you go ahead and get to Psalm 82. Who's got 22:19? It's quick. You don't even have to use a mic. Just shout.
And he said, Hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by him, on his right hand and on his left.
Okay, and we're talking about in the context, remember Micaiah and Ahaz? And Micaiah's that prophet. Hey, is there one more prophet? Right? Yeah, there's that Micaiah guy, but he always says mean things about me. Right? He always has a bad word to say against me. And so they go to Micaiah, and Micaiah basically says, hey, Ahaz, I'll tell you the truth. If you go into battle, you're going to die. And here's the vision that I saw. God was sitting among his host of heaven. And they came up with the plan, how are we going to deceive Ahaz? He said, hey, let's send a lying spirit. All right, and they go ahead with it. So a host of heaven. Joe, you go ahead and read Psalm 82. And you're reading ESV, right?
Yes. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations.
Okay, so we have God amongst his divine council. If you have the NASB, it's probably going to say rulers and judges. It's because they get very uncomfortable with the Elohim, which is the term here. He is amongst the Elohim. That's not a human term. That is a spiritual divine term. He is amongst the sons of God, the Elohim, the divine council. And he tells them, if you don't begin to judge correctly, what am I going to do? You will die like mere men. And so we have over here in Isaiah 24, not only do the host of heaven, why are the host of heaven a part of the judgment of the earth? Can anyone think of that? Right, why can't they be separately judged? Why are they being judged together? Okay, only God's perfect. Okay. What is it about the host of heaven and the host of earth that they could be being judged together? Now, look, we're talking about the rulers, the kings of earth, right? It's a specific class of people, and the host of heaven. Okay, so one, guilt. Yep.
They're out.
Yep.
And this stands as a warning to the other Elohim not to follow that. No different than God gives us direction, don't follow evil. Same thing holds true there.
Yep.
A sense of hierarchy as well, because isn't the fact that we were created in God's image that we were going to end up ruling over the angels?
So, yes, there is an aspect of us ruling the angels, and I'm developing a class on that concept because my mind doesn't comprehend that well, but I feel like I figured out the key to that. You know, in 20 years I'll look back and think I was foolish, but yes, right. But think about passages like Ephesians 6:10. We do not fight against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers of the spiritual realm. And when you get to Revelation, the city of Rome, what is the power behind the city of Rome and the harlot in the city? Or Jerusalem, whatever you want to consider. You know, we'll study Revelation here soon and figure out if it's Rome or Jerusalem we're talking about. But what's the power behind whatever city it is? It's the dragon, the beast. It's the spirit. And so, not only is the Rome or Jerusalem, whoever you think it is, that city going to be punished, but they're being punished because they've given into the influence of whom? Satan. Right? And so, here's just, if you've never been in any of my spiritual realm classes, I'm sorry, but I'm going to give you something to chew on. God put angels over every single nation. We're going to call them angels, Elohim, sons of God. One of the things that was very unique to Israel was they wouldn't just have an Elohim, they had who leading them? God himself. Remember the Exodus 33 and Exodus 34 story. God says, okay, you can go into the land and I will just send like all the other nations. And Moses is going, we don't want to be like the other nations. You called us to be different. And we can bring in Deuteronomy 32:17, right, where they became worshipped as demons. But the Hebrew word demon, you know what that word means? Lesser God. Right? It's not like we think of demons because we get the images from the 1600s and 1700s as these creatures, you know, spawns of Satan. They're not. They are Elohim who are working for God. They're seraphim, right? They're angels with, wings, if you want to consider that. They're just lesser beings, but they're beings of power who God put over Babylon. And instead of instructing Babylon, they corrupted Babylon and took on worship themselves. Right? And we'll get into that study again here in a little bit. Someone else asked me to kind of go through that again, and so we're going to probably do that again and probably next year. But, so they're going to be punished together because they work together. Now, and not in a way like where, the kings are sitting there speaking to these beings. They're being influenced the same way we are influenced by Satan. Okay?
Are you sure?
I think so.
Okay, questions. First of all, why does God need anybody else? Okay? Why does he have a host? I'm picturing this person in a big meeting room with all these people. Okay? So why does he need a host of people? Is it just people he dictates to do things? And who are these other gods? I'm confused with this whole thing.
Okay.
Is that the angels?
So, okay, yes. So we use the word angels to describe many different beings. It's kind of a generic term. New Testament, Greek, uses the word angelos, which is, so angelos just means messenger. So in the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, you're actually not going to see the word angels, you're going to see the word messengers. The messengers. Okay? And you may hear that if you're ever reading, watching a movie that has kind of like some biblical apocalyptic stuff, you're going to hear the word, instead of angels, they're going to be called messengers. Well, that's what the term is. They are just one of many of the sons of God or host of heaven. Now, you ask a good question. Why does God need them? Why does God need humans? In Genesis 1, 26, 27, and 28, why does he create humans? To reign and to rule over God's creation. Why does he need that? It has nothing to do with what God needs. It has everything to do with when God creates a being, he gives them purpose. He gives them a reason. He tells them all the time, I can do this without you. Actually, Paul's entire defense in Acts chapter 17 is that God doesn't need our worship. He needs nothing from us, like other gods, right, in the mythologies who need, worship to sustain strength. The more people they can get to follow them, the stronger they become, right? God doesn't need any of that, right? So when God creates these messengers, these hosts, this points us to the type of God that we serve. God is a relational, or the Old Testament would use covenantal. He loves to enter into covenants with people. Why? He does not want to exist alone. From all we can point, God can exist alone. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit exist by themselves. Do they want to? No. And so they have created a host of heaven, a host of earth, all for the grand purpose, and what we're going to get to Isaiah 25, is that we can live and work and serve together, right? So, like in 1 Kings 22, let's just go read that process real quick. And Joe, you have something while we're turning there. Go ahead.
I was going to just make the point that when God, you mentioned purpose.
Yeah.
That we're all made for a purpose. And how many times have we heard people complain, if you're going to hire me for this job, let me do my job,
Yeah.
right? So God gives these Elohims, this host of heaven, work. The same way he gives us work, he gives them work. To the point that I would like to study sometime too, will we have work in heaven? What does Scripture describe for us? What will we do? I don't know if that's the case.
I think we will.
I do too. But the reality of it is God treats us
Yep, I agree. So let's go to 1 Kings 22 real quick, and I'm just going to read this. Look at this process. Once again, we are only given the what happens, not always the why, right? We know God can exist alone, right? We know God can rule over everything. We know God doesn't need help, right? We all believe that. That's a part of God's nature. So why does he? We have to kind of fill in the blanks there. But I think this is a really interesting story. So Micaiah, verse 19, then Micaiah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all your prophets. The Lord has declared disaster for you. Question is, could God have done that by himself? Absolutely. Why does he have a host of heaven? Because he created beings and he gave them a function. Like in Zechariah, let's go over there real quick since we only have a few minutes. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 1 real quick. I think it's in like verse 9. Yeah. So then I said, well, let's start in verse 7. On the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, saying, I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He is standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. Then I said, what are these, my Lord? The angel who talked with me said to me, all right, so we got a messenger of God. I will show you what they are. So the man was standing among the myrtle trees and answered, they are whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth. And they answered, the angel of the Lord who is standing among the myrtle trees. And they said, we have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest. Then the angel of the Lord said, O Lord of hosts, how long we have no mercy on Jerusalem, the cities of Judah. And it just goes on and on and on. So Zechariah is talking to an angel as if he's talking to the Lord, but they're seeing these beings, and we consider them angels, right? But they're just angelic hosts, Elohim, who were riding on horses. Are they really riding on horses? Probably not, but you get the picture, at least for Jerusalem. They're riders, and what do riders do when you send them out? They usually take messages and they bring messages back. And what are they reporting to God? They're reporting to God how the earth is doing, how the nations are doing. Does God need that report? No, but once again, he's given these beings a task. They are completing the task. Has God appeared before people with his own divine presence before? Yeah. Does sometimes God send angels to do it? Yeah. Why? I don't know. But I know that when those angels don't perform their tasks, God says, you will be punished and you will die like mere men.
Just to follow on angels, do you think it's possible that God, being perfect, has a difficulty understanding the thoughts and actions of those who are imperfect, and therefore kind of has them as a translation of like, here's what's going on from our perspective of imperfect angels?
Okay, let me repeat that. So God being perfect possibly has a hard time understanding the minds of the imperfect. I don't know if he's having a hard time understanding the minds, but there's something about the role and the work of Jesus coming into the world that gave him a level of compassion or a level of mercy he did not have before, right? Could that be part of the reasons? Maybe, right? Maybe. But I think one of the major things is God does not leave these nations alone. And it's interesting when you go through Scripture, all of a sudden you'll find prophets of God in random countries, won't you? In random countries. Now in Hebrews, who does it tell us the word of the Lord comes from? Hebrews chapter 2. Angels. Angels are the ones who give, when it says, this is a word from the Lord, who gave that to them? Right? The Spirit of God obviously sent a messenger who then gave it to them. Well, who gave it to, let's say, Moses' father-in-law? He was a prophet of the Most High God, but he wasn't an Israelite. They also had these heavenly hosts who were out there giving a word of the Lord amongst the Gentiles, it seems. Balaam himself was a prophet of God, right? So there's a lot we don't know. One, because we don't really study this. We don't sit around and talk about it. And I know we just finished, but the point of all this is that these nations are not working alone. These heavenly hosts have a task, Psalm 82, to teach justice and mercy to the ruling class. But the ruling class and the host of heaven are almost in cahoots, is that right? Together. And God's going to punish them both. Right? He's going to punish them both. So that's where we end. I really wanted to get in Isaiah 25 tonight, but that was a good discussion. Be prepared for that spiritual world class to come again. Thank you.